Hey folks, welcome back. I wanted to jump in with this intriguing tag from the lovely Codi, Tarot Readings from a Bitch. If you are not familiar with Codi's channel, I would highly recommend you go and check her out. There's a lot of variety over there in particular, which is one of the things I love about her channel. And the reason that I wanted to jump in with this tag is the premise of it intrigued me. It's called Tarot Reviewer Questions. The idea was to find a good fit between deck reviewers and watchers, which with so many of us out there nowadays, it feels like, it makes a lot of sense to me. Watching tarot reviews and hearing about people's tarot experience was really the first things that I watched on tarot YouTube, and how I sort of came into that part of the community as a content consumer. So yeah, let's dive into this. Of course, the only thing being is I don't show my face on my channel, at least on YouTube, and you're going to have to look at my altar and then perhaps I'll just shuffle through a few decks, but you can always listen and do something else while you're listening. So don't worry if you're not watching the video. It's not really a show and tell. I'm going to light this quickly. Question 1 is, what is my tarot experience? To give you just a quick background insight, my mother was into tarot and many other spiritual, witchy and adjacent things when I was born. So were many of her friends. My dad is into aspects of the occult and some crossovers, and then also my stepmom and her dad have their own tarot and spiritual interests. So whoever I was kind of with throughout my life, I was often in environments where tarot was in use, or at least normalised. I started out using my mum's tarot and oracles as a young child, so I got my starter decks out so that I could flick through something as I was showing you, which is the Medicine Woman Tarot and the Mythic Tarot, although this was not my childhood copy. Yeah, so I played around with those. I listened to her readings and interpretations. She would also use tarot for dream stuff as well. Sometimes I listened to a few of her pals doing them. And then I was bought my own, which was this. And I don't recall the specific age, but I know that I was young. And I really enjoyed reading for myself, and by my pre-teens and into my teens I was then reading for a few of my friends on occasion as well. I mostly read intuitively because that's something that this deck really lended itself to, but I did also use the Mythic Tarot book, which was quite a popular one of its time, or basically anything else that my mum had when I saw her. I was definitely encouraged to story read the cards, as well as considering like the framing of the question and what was going on. So that's how I kind of entered into tarot. And like Codi said, a lot of kind of 90s offerings in particular would have had a lot of influence in the way that I was reading when I was engaging with tarot books. But like many who grew up around tarot, I did have breaks, some larger than others. So in my late teens, it kind of started to peter out. And then at the end of that and into my, I'd say up to around my mid-20s, I don't think that I'd touched my decks much at all. And when I did, it was much more likely my medicine cards, so an oracle deck. I did then return in my later 20s after I had finished my studies and some other bits to learn systems fully, and I started learning the Rider-Waite-Smith system, other associations, later jumping into like tarot challenges, YouTube, Instagram, swapping readings with friends, taking tarot courses. Lindsay Mack's my favourite of the tarot courses I've done. And eventually I found a really nice blend between my psychotherapy training and tarot that led me to eventually reading for others professionally. To summarise, I've read since I was young, but it's not as cut and dry as that. It really is. In terms of being back reading solidly, I've maintained this practice again since at least the beginning of 2016. I think 2015, because I was studying and sharing through blogging before I started sharing on Instagram and then YouTube, but my memory is a little iffy with dates. Question 2 is, why do I review decks? Predominantly, I share my experience with others as a way to connect with the community through this shared hobby and passion. I enjoy sharing my excitement and in honesty, it's continued to be a way to engage with community as I've become disabled and can't really connect with communities in real life very often anymore. All of my offerings online also exist as a way to kind of journal my own experience, and I do go back and interact and reflect on them at times, and to provide others with an insight into my practice as well as the deck itself, at least through my lens. For me, I also find reviews really can inspire people who either own the deck already, have similar decks, or even just like they really like a part of the practice that I've shared. And so it gives this, I suppose, this spark of inspiration or this opportunity to try something new or different in their own practice. And I feel that that's possible because not only from feedback, but it's definitely things that I had taken away from watching very experiential reviews in the past. There is a part of me that realises it's useful to people contemplating a deck as well, and honestly I think that it's good to be conscious in our consumption and really consider and know what we're buying before doing so. If that's your approach, it's definitely mine, and I know that reviews often help me realise decks aren't for me more than anything. So whilst it's not my motivation, due to this I do usually share the entirety of a deck too. I'll often put them back in order so that people can take in the artwork and the book for themselves. Also, the really beautiful extension for me about reviews is it supports the creators in one way or another whose work I am embracing and like bringing into my practice. And these are all reasons that I have and do watch other people's reviews. So really to share the deck, but also the experience that I'm having, which is the key driving factor for me. Question 3 is, how did I get into reviewing decks? I had been watching them for a while alongside starting my own tarot tube with like walkthroughs, VRs and favourites. So it felt like the next step for me to share my existing experience of a deck instead of just, you know, walking through and commenting on the artwork or a silent flip through. I realised that it was considered quite helpful or interesting to others, and because I already loved it, that was another thing that got me excited about reviewing decks. Also, people had started to request it a little as well, I think, from memory. And to be honest, deck reviews get a lot of engagement in terms of conversation, and connecting with people is my key reason for getting onto Instagram and YouTube in the first place. So question 4 is, do I receive decks for review? And I have in the past, yes. So I decided to get a deck out that I have received for review. I still own and love this deck. This is 𝗪𝗁𝗀. The main creator I don't think is around at the moment in the community, but anyway, we will look through this while I answer. Mainly I have randomly and occasionally been reached out to by an indie deck creator and agreed to have the deck for review if it was something that I was interested in. I've never agreed to a deck that I out and out knew wasn't for me, or I had strong feelings that it wouldn't be enjoyable. Not because critique makes me uncomfortable, because I include this in my reviews, but it just feels like a waste of my time, energy, practice. I'm not here on YouTube solely as a reviewer. I do review decks, but I won't review before several months of use, usually minimum as well. And to me, that is valuable energy that is going into this. So I don't want to spend that on something that's not for me. Reviewing isn't my job, although, as I say, I do them, and I have a tarot biz that has varying facets to it. Reviewing is also work, at least in the way that I do it, it is work, and so it needs to feel worth it for me. It also seems like a waste of time for the creator, to be honest, if I'm not interested in their deck at all. It's just not going to be helpful for them, to be honest. I did also once upon a time agree to review decks for a publishing company, most of which I did the reviews on Instagram actually. I requested that we discuss the decks I was sent before doing so, and both times either wires were crossed or other people from that publishing house must have sent me some of the parcels as well. I don't really know what happened. I ended up getting decks that weren't even in my kind of general thematic interest. They definitely weren't ones that I had agreed to be reviewing. I suppose I could have really declined, which I did in the end actually for several, and I gifted them on, but I felt like I needed to review most of those the first few times it had happened, and it was really evident in my reviews, and it was also a forced process, so I declined to continue. So I go on a deck by deck basis, and honestly, with so many reviewers out there who do it far more frequently or perhaps consider it a job and will take on many more decks, it's not like I'm getting a ton of offers, and lately I have turned down a lot more than I've ever accepted in totality. But I will be honest, I am always open to requests from the creators, and then I will discuss it with them. I don't request decks personally, that's not something I've done, and most of, or at least a large chunk of the reviews that I have done over time have been decks that I've bought with my own money or requested as gifts from like loved ones. Question 5 is, what kind of reader am I? So there was several ways that I interpreted this based on Codi's video and a few others that I watched as well. I read with a mixture of influences, predominantly now numerology and elemental tarot foundations, and then my approach is a meeting of psychological and intuitive, because I've spent a lot of time considering the archetypes and my other career and interests and kind of integrating those. But there are also a lot of storytelling aspects where I am influenced by the art. And what I mean by that is, I know that some people read tarot as tarot as tarot. For me, if I did that, I'd have far less decks. One of the things that I enjoy is really allowing the art and the style of the deck to be a part of the influence, part of the discussion, and it definitely infuses my readings. When I'm reading for others, I will discuss the art often. Even in the more pippish decks, there's always colours, placement, how they weave together. I have studied ภิðrr, and there are influences of that as well, dependent on the deck. In terms of how I read for others, on top of that, I do live video reading, which is tailored to the individual as we go at the moment. So I've done different styles in the past. And while I spread read in my own tarot practice of points, when I read for others, it is freeform, and any kind of spread creations tailored as we go through these kind of conversational readings. I like to remain honest and talk about the hard shit with my clients and encourage them to take responsibility and retain autonomy in their readings, in the same way that I hope to do so for myself, although it's a little bit more challenging for yourself, but that is the aim, of course. And yeah, other than that, it's hard to describe my personality other than what you get here if you're familiar with me. Question 6 is, what kind of decks do I gravitate toward? This is a nice quick one. The decks that really kind of grab my attention and make up most of my collection, fall under the themes of kind of macabre, nature, or fantastical. So anything from like animal decks, earthy decks in general, landscape ones, fae decks, vampire decks, skeleton decks, either scenic or pippish. That's my general kind of vibe. In terms of colour, I really like darker or muted or kind of vintage tones. Again, things that you will see throughout the majority of my deck collection. I also like two-tone monochrome kind of vibes as well. And I don't have much more to add to this because I think the next question kind of complements it, which is what do I like in a deck, and then we'll get into what I dislike in a deck. So these kind of round that out for me. I like something that inspires my creativity, my ability to story weave, and something that helps me better tap into like the emotional layers, not just the psychological ones. I like decks that really just spark conversation and exploration, and decks that do something a little different from, you know, your average Rider-Waite-Smith, Thoth or 𝗪𝗂 or any of their very like tight clones. I suppose a lot of my loves in deck world are less traditional, but I still want a clear tarot infused educated system. So the person who created it still knows what they're talking about. They have a clear idea. If you don't know what I mean by less traditional, I did a whole video about less traditional decks, or non-traditional decks I think I called it, so I will link it below. I love decks that create their worlds well and feel very cohesive. You know, you can really just fall into them and be in them. It's like being in a dream, like it's very real in that moment. I really appreciate things that are well researched or clearly like a very long passion of the creator, because I think that you can tell when they're not, for the most part. And how well I can vibe with the images, how well I can read it without any aid. So I do love books that well support their decks, but I want to not feel reliant on that, especially with my tarot. It needs to make sense to me and not just feel like it's a mishmash of whatever. And one of the things that really draws me into decks nowadays is something that I don't already feel is in my collection, but I want, that is a part of my practice that feels relevant. So I also use decks in ritual, spellcraft and spirit work too. And a deck might really lend itself to a facet of that instead. On a more, I suppose, superficial layer, although the more that I think about it, the more it doesn't feel superficial to me, because of course we're talking about money and owning things and physical creations and the, you know, if you think about the impacts on the environment and all of those other conversations. I'm not particular about certain aspects of the cardstock so much, but I like things that are friendly to my hands and durable. I don't care if it's linen, satin, matte, just as long as it actually shuffles and doesn't start chipping and falling apart immediately. So that's kind of what I mean. And then question 8 is, what do I dislike in a deck? And there will always be exceptions to any of these, by the way, of course, but these are generalizations. I'm not really a lover of modern decks, everyday living or peopleish decks. I know vampires and fae decks and stuff can look peopleish, but actual everyday living people decks, I have perhaps 2, 3, I don't know. Even some of my more people heavy decks look quite fantastical, like the 𝗪𝗪𝗀 still has quite a fantastical quality to me. In terms of just the overall aesthetic, I suppose, I don't tend to do cutesy decks, even if they're in the fantasy realms. I'm not really into bright or bold colours or pastel colours as a general rule. I'm not massively into TV or movie themed decks, despite having one. And just obviously then there's a lot of themes that are not of any interest to me in particular. I don't particularly like love and light themes, alien themes, various spiritual or religious tropes and focuses that I have no interest in. And just as a broad example, to be honest, I don't actually tend to like decks that claim that they're for shadow work either, but there's a whole discussion of why, because I do engage with shadow work. I think it's misinterpreted a lot. And then just decks that feel like they're not doing anything original. And it's not about it being a Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's just about being another, say, Rider-Waite-Smith clone or Rider-Waite-Smith clone-ish, you know, close enough, where it's been done for the millionth time. And of course I don't like cardstock that's not going to last. There was a few notes in Laura of 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝑚arine's video that I also agreed with. I struggle with decks that don't have cohesion, so the collaborative ones don't tend to go very well for me. And Laura said that, of course, and hopefully this is a given, just because a deck isn't for me, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it's not well created, well thought out. Oh, and I really don't love gilding. I don't understand the gilding thing. Hard, not a fan of gilding. I suppose if you extend this to the creators, I'm sure that I am going to own a deck at some point where the creator has done something that if I found out about it, I wouldn't be on board with. But generally, as time goes on, when you're involved in the community, you're aware of the present creators that might be causing shit in the community or other stuff is going on in their creations. And of course, if I'm aware of that, they're not going to get my support anyway. I didn't show you much, but we're at the final question. What do I not care about in a deck? So just meh, I suppose. These are things that I might still randomly comment on in a review, but they aren't really important to me, nor factors that I take into consideration when buying a deck. I really don't care about the box production quality and size of this or size of the book or whether the book fits in the box, any of that stuff. I don't tend to discuss much of that in my reviews at all, or really the size of the cards for too long. I'm sure that's changed over time. As long as I can use them, I couldn't care less about the card backs. Again, like I said, I have feelings about cardstock, but I don't tend to discuss it in depth. My reviews centre a lot more around, like I said, the experience with the deck's readability, what I do and don't read on with it, why it's working in my practice, how it inspires me, etc. Keywords don't bother me either way. If they have them, I can enjoy them and also ignore them, and if not, of course, there's no problem. And borders, because I know that borders tend to be a splitter for people. I am of the, I suppose, less popular or older opinion that borders tend to benefit the artwork a lot more often than not, but I honestly don't tend to care either way. I really don't. And finally, one that came into mind that was kind of relevant. What don't I care about in a deck? I don't tend to care about how others feel about the decks that I own, because it's such a personal experience. And it's not about not listening and holding space or being interested in others' opinions and experiences of decks, because I am. But I don't care enough for it to hold weight over my own. So when decks are really marmitey, like the Wild Unknown, people have really heavy opinions of that. I use it the way that I use it and it works for me because it does. That's kind of what I mean about that. So I thought that would be a fun one to finish on. Thank you to Codi for creating this, because like I said, it was an intriguing concept that, as someone who isn't consistently reviewing, it may be of interest to people, because when I do review, perhaps you're not interested in the review that I've put up. They vary in length, you know, there's no real set hard and fast rule for my reviews. Some of them tend to get a lot more focus on books than others, depending on how much it is, I don't know, I suppose significant. Either the book is offering a lot one way or another, even if I'm not using it, those kind of things. So I don't think that I have like a cookie cutter style for my reviews either, other than the focuses and the reasons that I already shared for doing them. So thank you, Codi. Go and check her video out. I will also put Laura's in the bio because I mentioned Laura's. I know that Martin has done a response to this already. I will be looking out for more responses. And other than that, I will catch you all again soon. Bye.